I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to helping more people create lives of freedom and impact through success in tech sales and the pursuit of self-development. And by the way, it's brought to you by Tech Sales Accelerator. Launch your six-figure tech sales career in the next 12 weeks. We have an amazing guest today, Marcus Chan. He's a dual offender. I've had him on before and he blew us away and he's going to do it again. We're going to talk about how to become a $250,000 to $500,000 tech sales earner as an account executive. And Marcus really is the best person to talk to us about it. He crushed his quota for, what was it, 13 years in sales, Marcus? Was it 13 years?
13 years in a row, 12 promos in eight years, my first 8 years. So
unbelievable. And closing, I was doing some research on LinkedIn, closing 700 million in total contract value, President's Club basically every year. And you were the first in your company's 90-year history to run a team of 110 at your age. And how old were you when you were running that team of 110?
30 years old.
I'm 31. I'm a little bit behind. I'm not running a team of 110. Marcus has gone on, after being a proven real-world producer, to, as I said, be the author of six-figure sales secrets, but also train people at the companies that maybe you're working at or that you want to get into, like Google, Dell, Gartner, Zoom. What other ones are you proud of, Marcus, where you've trained?
Oh, man, we've had so many now, whether it could be Salesforce, Splunk, it could be Zoom Info, it could be, Tableau. We have so many logos now, right? As a result. But I think the thing is, what I feel most blessed about is, these AEs, these reps are able to change their own lives and achieve things they never thought possible in their career, and to do things they never thought possible as well. Because as you and I both know, making a lot of money is really cool, but when you excel in your career, it gives you a level of different confidence. But also, then you can also do other things too, whether you give back, you can donate money, you can buy more time, you can go on vacation, you can take care of your family. That's what's really all about.
Absolutely. And so we're going to start off digging into that. So guys, if I haven't sold Marcus's credibility, then I don't know what else I can do here, but just wanted to set a context for who we're learning from today. Make sure to stay for the whole conversation to get as much value as possible. And don't just watch it, but this conversation, I'd encourage you to watch it multiple times, take notes so that you can translate it into action and celebrate, what you learn in your successes in the comments. So Marcus, let's start off by painting a picture of, like, what does this tech sales path actually empower when it comes to helping AEs create the lives of their dreams? Because I saw that was something you put on your profile. It's like you help people ultimately create the lives of their dreams. So tell us about this path and where it can go.
Well, I think before I go on, I think it's important to give you a little bit of context, right? So, I grew up really, really poor, right? I was a middle child of Chinese immigrants, right? And my parents actually were entrepreneurs, had a restaurant. And I grew up working in the restaurant. So I saw my family putting 80 to 100 plus hours a week of working and not making very much money. And that was kind of the opportunity vehicle that I saw them go into. And as I got older, I'm like, I never want to do that. Like not only do they work that hard, they were never really around because they were working so hard. So I'm like, okay, how could I join an opportunity vehicle, right? Where it's like, it can be high leverage. I can use my brain to make money and to make exponential money and do it in a grand way. And B2B sales, tech sales is really the way to get there, right? And reality is what a lot of people, when they go into tech sales or they go to B2B sales and they have a decent opportunity to earn a decent amount of money, most of them don't fully maximize the opportunity. So they kind of go into the company, they start working with the company, taking their training, whatever. But the reality is when you look at any stat across the board, the average team has only about 50% people hitting quota, right? At the best, right? So that's a pretty scary stat where most people are actually going to miss their number. So what that means is most people are actually never going to fully maximize their potential to make the money they really want to make. And I think the good way to think about this is, let's just say if for example, if you're watching this, you have a 200K OT as your on-target earnings, all right? And so that means just hitting your number, let's call it your keep your job number, just hitting your number is going to make you 200K. Now, that's fine just doing that, but what's your upside from maxing out your comp plan, hitting the accelerators and all the spiffs? Is it 400K, 450, 500 or more, right? And chances are pretty good if you have a, say, 200K OTE, it's significantly higher. So let's just say even it's capped at 400K. So even just doubles, it's 400K. So every year, though, that you're not hitting 400K is actually costing you that net difference. So if you're just hitting your target of 200K, you're costing yourself the difference of $200,000, right? If you're hitting 150K in earnings, that's your net difference of 250. So that's your opportunity cost. And what a lot of people don't realize is that costs you every single year. And early on in my own career, I realized every year I wasn't do my best to maximize my comp plan, leverage all the earnings, it would cost me more. So once I realized that and I focused heavily on blowing out my comp plan, making as much money as possible, it allowed me to do other things with those earnings. So now when I talk to sales professionals, like when we take someone who's maybe they're just hitting their number, right? Which is still good, just at least hitting their number, but we help them do 150%, 200% and beyond, and they're maxing their comp plan out. What ends up happening is they start to achieve far more things. So I'll give you a really simple example. We've got Julian in our program, absolute stud. And when we started working with him, he worked for a smaller tech company. He was making about 100, 150K a year, every year. Not bad, decent income, relatively young guy. Started working with them. First year made $250,000. All right, so beautiful. So add an extra, call it $100,000 onto his earnings. Great. Pretty much capped out. So really couldn't do more just because of comps, because of opportunity vehicles he was in. However, because now we started to increase his skill stack, he was able to go into a different opportunity, into a different company. So he went from there to a company called ZoomInfo, right? At ZoomInfo, in the mid-market enterprise AE role, his first year, he became the #1 rep at ZoomInfo, and he made over $848,000.
Wow.
So
nice.
Exponential now, right? So like now it's let's call it $600,000 more the following year. Now here's the thing: the money is really cool, whatever, right? But what's really cool
when I hear that,
I mean, it was pretty awesome. But like,
light up.
I'm excited for him. But he's like the best part. He's like, listen, like I'm able to pay off debts. I'm able to take care of my aging parents, right? I think they live in like Colombia, right? He also bought his first like property, right? Rental property, right? It's furnished into an Airbnb. So he's starting a side hustle. So like, he's getting recognized as a company. He has more confidence. So like, that's really the cool part. That's like, those are the side effects of when you start to learn how to maximize your earning potential and you use it as a tool to get to where you want to go versus just being okay with just hitting your number or just, hopefully hitting your number.
So you mentioned a term in our conversation that we're having before going live here on escape velocity.
Right.
And tell us, I don't even want to throw any of my perspective into this. You tell us for dummies, what is escape velocity and how does this apply to the tech sales path?
Yeah. So escape velocity is a term that means, hey, like how long will it take for me to basically make enough money or I can stack the cash and capital, if you have capital as part of your comp structure, to be able to exit out of working for someone else to do whatever I want, to have true financial freedom to do what you want, with who you want, when you want, wherever you want, like true ultimate freedom. And it's also tied to what's known as the FIRE lifestyle, if you're familiar with that, which is financial independence, retire early.
Mm.
And in order to get there, it's actually a relatively simple formula, which is, you just take a look at really like what's your typical annual lifestyle burn for cash? How much cash are you burning every year from your life expenses, right? And then you multiply out how many years you want to have at least stacked up so you can basically leave corporate, feel comfortable and safe, right? And so for example, like for me personally, like I'm like, I want to have at least 20 years completely covered, right? For my whole family, myself, plus you build in inflation, plus other expenses, et cetera, and plus life, right? I want to have at least 20 plus years of that set aside after tax cash that I can access. So some of it might be held in stocks, so I can still access it easily, but I can access things with very minimal fees, right? And to get to that point it's definitely not easy, but when you're in an opportunity vehicle like tech sales, if you do it right, you can get there much faster. So for example, I have many great friends who are, they're in sales coaching as well, and they're able to do it in their mid to late 40s, right? which is still incredibly admirable, right? So about 20 years into a career. Like I was super fortunate that I was able to do by 35.
Wow.
And a lot of it has to do with, it wasn't because I was anybody special. I realized this principle earlier on, I think first off. So I started to work towards it with the right habits up front, from skills to like how to develop, to how I manage my money, to how I do all these things. Because ultimately, to have the ultimate freedom to do whatever you want is really quite powerful. So for instance, now I've been doing my own thing now for 5 years. I could not work. I wouldn't have, I could not do this if I didn't want to, right? I actually enjoy doing this, right? But I like to have the choice to do whatever I want. If this is my season right now, great. The next season I want to do something different, I'm gonna do something different. I'll never not do anything, but I want the freedom to decide to do whatever I want.
So that's what we're talking about today, what it takes to earn that freedom for yourself, for your family. And you mentioned some of your friends, and it turns out some of my other guests are good friends of yours. Like now I think, right, is it Kyle Van Voris? Like, are you buddies with Kyle?
I'm friends with Kyle, yeah.
Jason Bay, or
yeah.
And I don't know, man, if the actual situation, but and there might be a few others, but because you mentioned a couple buddies that are in the coaching industry, are you able to share some of the other names? The same.
Yeah. Ian Konak is a really popular.
Okay. A lot of people I had him on.
Yeah. Ian's fantastic, right? He also achieved escape velocity, early on as well. Brandon Flaherty, same, similar as well, right? So, a lot of these guys, like, and I think for a lot of them, maybe the difference was like I failed so early on and I'm so terrible. I'm like, I gotta get my act together, and maybe they had better success than I was, or maybe they're smarter than I was, but I think I just realized so much early on, I'm like, my God, I gotta get my act together.
Well, 35, right? That was your when you reached escape velocity.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. That's so young, man. And I'm 31. So maybe I didn't manage a team of 110 at this point, but hey, I got 4 years to reach escape velocity. So it gives me some, man. So that's why I'm excited about this combo. There's many directions I want to take this, but I'll try and keep us organized. Gosh, like in real quick aside though, before we get into some of the tactics, I think the story of how you met your wife was so great. I saw it on LinkedIn and it's just always stuck with me.
Yeah.
That wasn't that in college. It wasn't in college.
Oh yeah.
What's the story? Because I mean, that's actually, I think the most important thing is finding the love of your life, and the way it went down for you was pretty extraordinary. And I think there's a lesson in it too.
So. Oh, for sure. And I think it's, I think one of the greatest like life hacks is literally who you marry. Is like, I mean, that completely can change your trajectory. So I actually met my wife years ago. So this was 2003, and I was in college, and there was one of those like free buffets for like college kids on campus, right? So all the kids would just attend, and I was hanging with my buddies at a table, and I see her across the room in the buffet line, and I'm like, oh, that girl is super hot. And I asked my buddies, anybody know who she is? No one. Everyone's like, no, I don't know who she is. I'm like, watch this. I'm gonna get her number. So I'm cocky. I'm arrogant. I go up to her. I don't remember what I said, but she completely shut me down, and it did not work. Like ice queen to me. I'm like, oh man. So I walk back. My buddies see the whole thing. They're laughing. They're like, what a bozo. And I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna give up. So like later on that evening, I see her. I'm like, I'm gonna go back and let me see if I can try again. I go back. I end up getting her number. I'm like, all right, great. Now, over the next year or so, I attempt to call her and text her to hang out. She never responds.
For a year?
For a year.
And
now, it wasn't like every day, by the way. It wasn't like every day. It's maybe like once every couple months.
And this is the art of follow-up, by the way. Nice insight right there. Whether it's dating prospects or actual prospects, you don't want to overdo it on the follow-up. But hey, we got to break down though. The second time you did get the number, you made progress. So do you remember, like, what did you say? Were you just like disarming and authentic? Like I don't
even remember what I said.
You don't remember?
I was probably just being stupid, or I might have just been like walking over there bumbling over my words and be like, hey, listen, like, would you ever want to hang out sometime and get coffee? Probably something very boring, right? Anyways,
that's the key. You went for it again.
I did.
And I think that is such a great lesson in life. Like your
Oh yeah.
rational brain, anyone would say, give up, like it didn't work out, and you start to devolve into negativity. But you were unreasonable. You stepped
Yes.
outside the world of rationality and you went for it again,
Right.
baby, and you got the number. So, anyways, now you're following up for a year.
Yeah. So fast forward a year goes by and never responds. There's no engagement back at all. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Now, fast forward a year later, I'm at I was part of this some like it was part of the Asian Pacific American Student Union, and they had this like date auction fashion show event thing, right? And like, I was like one of the people helping out with the event, like on stage and stuff, whatever. And I do the whole thing, and then after the event's over, she's in the crowd. She comes up to me, and she's like, "Hey, like how like how's it going?" I'm like, "Oh, I hadn't seen her like a year." I'm like, "This is so strange." I'm like, "Okay, she has not engaged all year. Now she's having a conversation with me." Now I was dating someone at the time, Chris. So I'm like, "We're just having a light conversation. Great, whatever. See you later."
Yeah.
Fast forward a year later, I see her again in the same place, same event. A year later. Again, I'm dating someone different this time. All right. So I'm like, again, timing is just completely off.
You had a girlfriend when you saw her again, and then you had a different girlfriend when you saw her again.
Correct.
All right.
All right. Now, fast forward to like, I think it was the following summer. And this is like September 2005. And I had just gotten back from living in Beijing, China for about half a year. And every year I used to get a new phone number, and I'd move my old contacts numbers to my new phone. And I was going through my phone, deleting old numbers. And if you remember back in college, especially, you would like label people's names plus some sort of like trigger to help you remember, right? And be like, it'd be like Marcus, Math 241, like just so you're like, okay, so you know who that person is.
Yeah.
Now hers was Sarah Mo Hot Persian. I'm like, oh, let's just see what Sarah Mo Hot Persian's up to. Send a little text. Hey, how's it going? And she calls.
No way.
She calls. So I'm like, hello? And she's like, hey. I'm like, hey. She's like, who is this? I have a new number. I totally forgot I had a new number when I texted her. And I'm like, oh, hey, it's Marcus Chan. And she's like, oh, hey. I'm like, okay.
Oh.
I'm like, all right. And she's like, how's it going? I'm like, well, I'm good, actually. I just came back from China, blah, blah, blah. How about you? She's like, oh, I just came back from Spain. I'm like, oh, it's cool. She's like, she was working there, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, cool. And she's like, I'm actually moving back to Eugene, Oregon, because that's where University of Oregon is. I'm moving back to Eugene actually next weekend, for my senior year. And I said, oh, you know what? I live in Eugene. Like, hey, do you need some help moving? I'd be happy to help.
Oh.
Right? That's an opening. I'm going for it. And she says, that sounds great. I'll give you a call next week on Saturday while I'm coming in town. I'll be with my mom. I said, awesome, great. So fast forward a week later, it's Saturday. I'm hanging out with my best friend Mike. I'm like, Mike, listen, like we can't get wasted today. We can't do anything. It can't be irresponsible. Like this girl's gonna call me. I'm gonna go help her move. I gotta drive later. He's like, got it, no worries. She never calls.
I mean, you were offering a big value add to help.
It was a big free value. I'm just saying, right? So, anyways, next day, Sunday, she actually calls me, and she's like, "Hey, like, super sorry. Like, I meant to call you yesterday, but my mom and I actually was pretty easy, so we didn't really need any help. But do you still want to get together?" I'm like, sure. Yes, I guess we can get together. That's fine. What do you want to do? I'm like, okay, what? This is like 3+ years in the making at this point. I'm like, all right.
And you were like kind of detached at that point.
100%. So then at that point, she's like, okay, let's get some ice cream. So next day I go pick her up and we go have ice cream. And now, by the way, this is the first time we're like sitting down and having like just me and her. There's nobody else around. And actually, I wouldn't even call it a date. It was just like, we're just like hanging out. And I'm like, this is the first time we've actually had a conversation. Because I really didn't know that much about her. So I'm like, and we started talking, and like all I knew is she was like super attractive, and that's all I really knew. And we start talking, and I find out that she's absolutely incredible. I'm like, she speaks like 5 different languages. She's like a 4.2 like GPA. It's crazy. Yeah. She's like elite of the elite of education, like super smart, super savvy. I'm like, dang, she's like smart. She's beautiful. She's got great personality. She's like very warm, very charismatic. I'm like, wow, this is kind of like almost too good to be true. So anyways, that was the first time hanging out, and we got done. I'm like, oh my God, this girl's incredible. Right. And, fast forward 6 months, we started to see each other more often. And then we started dating. And then long story short, but that was the hardest part at that point, getting to that point of even like getting to our first date. We've now been together for, we've been married now for coming on 15 years. Right.
Wow. Congratulations. That is no joke. 15 years.
It's been pretty cool. But, and what's interesting is, her and I have spoken as well about this too. I'm like, it was probably better that early on we really didn't start like dating or hanging out, because I wasn't the man she needed. Like I wasn't mentally quite ready. I was still wildly immature. I still didn't know what was going on. I wasn't the person I needed to be quite yet.
Mm-hmm.
So like at that point, like when we finally got together, started hanging out, years later, I was, I made a lot of mistakes. I was a little more mature, but I had a better head on my shoulders, and my trajectory was more aligned, to where I wanted to go. And it really ended up working out well, because then we started getting really serious with each other. And, we were able to kind of build our lives together. And we realized we had so many common values. And that was the biggest thing. Like, we had some common interests, but most importantly, our values are super aligned. And that made it just really powerful for us, for our relationship, then for our marriage, having a kid, and building a pretty cool life together.
Gosh, what a good story. It really resonates with me based on where I'm at in my life. And I'm sure it does with others in the audience. We have a range of audience members. Some might be married, and maybe it reminds them of their story of how they met their loved one. But I just think it's special that you recognize now, looking back, that you weren't ready early on. And it did,
Right.
if anything, that could give some people faith that just stay patient and keep growing into the person you're capable of being. And
That's right.
but of course also be persistent. And I feel like there's definitely a parallel with some of the largest deals in sales.
Totally. Yeah.
Let's just talk real quick about the importance of persistence and follow up for like massive deals that can lead to life-changing money.
Oh yeah, 100%. Right. So, I think we all wish that we sold such an amazing product that after the very first meeting, they're like, amazing, send the DocuSign, we're ready to go. What's the longest contract? Double it. What's your price increase language? Double it. Let's ready to go right now. That's just not what happens, right? And the reality is we have to always play the long game, right? The example of my wife now is a good example, to even the big deals are a perfect example. Because what happens is, when you look at something on a longer time frame, right? So let's just say, for example, like most people look at deals and they're kind of thinking like, okay, I'm looking at this deal maybe in this quarter time frame, maybe a year at best. And my challenge to most people is like, can you look at it a longer time frame? Can you look at maybe a 5-year time frame? Because if you look as a 5-year deal you're going to be working, would you potentially do different things right now instead of what you probably would normally do? And here's what I mean by that. So let's just say you're working a large enterprise opportunity and your quarter's coming to the end and you're pacing to not hit your number. And that happens to the best of us. It's happened to me. Your instinct might be like, oh, here's this deal. I feel like it's kind of close to the line. Let me go see if I can throw like a discount at them to push to close. Now, if you do that, chances are very unlikely they're even going to move forward because of that, because there's usually other reasons why they haven't moved forward quite yet. So,
yep.
If you know it to be a case, right? But if you're thinking short-term wise, your short-term thinking, unfortunately, the short-term thinking of many sales managers as well is, well, we can give them 25% off right now, do it now. Or we can waive the X fee right now, go give it to them right now, see if we can get the deal to close. And again, short-term wise, it hurts, right? But long-term wise, if you take a step back and say, looking at just quarter, you look at the year, look at 5 years, you know it's not the best decision. And instead, what you may do instead is, okay, you know what? It's coming to quarter end. Instead of me just like trying to like email them with a discount, maybe what I can do, say it's before, like Christmas, it's like, let me go get them like a nice gift basket and just send it to them custom and just thank them for the opportunity so far. Because there's without any ask at all. And if you do it from that perspective, you can gain far more trust and momentum with that deal than anything else, right? And I'll give you a really, really simple example. So I'm working on this deal right now for my own business. The company is a $40 billion a year company, pretty big enterprise company. And the deal is actually supposed to get done in like October. And, we had legal had the paperwork. Okay. Finance is going through everything. I'm like, beautiful. I got everything's dialed. I got my economic buyer. I got my champions down. I'm like, hell yeah. We got this dial for like, year one, what we're going to do, year two, what we're going to do. I'm like, this is going to be a killer deal. Lo and behold, what happens? I get an email. Hey, it's like, I've argued every way how it's going to help us, but we're getting a freeze across the board. In fact, even our reps can't travel at all, even see customers this quarter. So we're going to have to put a pause until January, into Q1 basically. However, we've already also, I built everything of what you offer into my annual operating budget anyways already for Q1. So it shouldn't be a problem in Q1, but want to give you a heads up, super sorry, right? Now, if I'm thinking short term of just Q4, I'm doing something sleazy and weird and trying to push for a close. Instead, what do? I'm like, no problem. And I merely call him up. I say, do you see anything else that potentially would hold us back from making this happen in Q1? He's like, well, we just got to make sure our team delivers in Q1 or in Q4, excuse me. So I'm like, okay, no problem. Now, because I know some of the skill gaps this team already has, I'm saying, no problem. Let me send over a few resources that are completely free that your sales leaders can use right now to help in Q4, right? Pure value give. That's all I'm doing, right? So I do that for like end of October, November, do something as well. And then in December, my EA reached out to send them a gift basket as well, right? Now come early this week, January, call my guy up. He doesn't answer, but what happens? He immediately texts me before I can finish sending a message. Hey, I was planning to give you a call. I'm stacked this week. Let's get on a call and get our things dialed for Q1, right? So now we're back on the docket again. And this is a good example of running running a deal, but thinking a larger time frame. So this way you are persistent, but you're also doing the right things as part of your deal to actually add value to your buyer and help make it easy for them to buy.
Such a good example. And I have a deal that I had pursued all year last year, my biggest deal in the past 4 years. It pushed to Q1 because legal couldn't be rushed. Even though I sent them the contract on October 31st, I gave them so much lead time. They never got to it to the week of, and they didn't have their own enough knowledge and context to redline and to it. Right. They felt good about it. So literally I had the CFO ready to sign and the eng leader ready to go to get the cost savings we're looking for. And we missed it. And to your point, man, I had to accept. There was nothing really I could do other than equip them now to be ready to move forward in January. And now my guy says it's 50-50. It happens this month. We're going to get it. But I believe we're going to get it, period. Yeah. But I feel encouraged by what you shared about playing the long game. And did you get your deal yet, or it's still on the
still on the docket? Well, I'm not gonna I don't say it's done till that payment's in my bank.
Okay, well in that case, then we can both cheers to getting our deals.
Yeah, exactly. Cheers, right?
So I have so many questions for you. And the one thing that this is more of a random thing that I plan to talk about later, but the F word is a thing because we're talking about follow-ups. Yes. And this is a concept that more so applies to or when you've maybe qualified an opportunity and progressing it, but then they're going cold, I think. Yeah. But tell us about the F word and a better alternative than using the F word.
Beautiful. So the common F word that every other rep is usually making is, hey, I'm just following up. hey, I'm following up on this. I'm following,
Right.
and it could be anything. It could be, hey, I'm following up on this email I sent you. I'm following up on this thing I sent you. I'm following up because you told me to follow up. Now, the reason it's not good to use is it's just super overdone. It doesn't really mean anything. All right. And what happens is when every other rep is using that terminology and they're saying it constantly, whether it's written or verbally, people get blinded to it. So it's kind of like they start ignoring it. So it's kind of like when reps use a lot of like buzzwords, like if, like, for example, anyone that says AI now, customers are like, oh, like they start to roll their eyes because it's because they're so like inundated with it, right? And it's the same with the word follow up. So the simplest thing to do is actually, instead of using the word follow up, just replace it with specificity. Okay, be really specific on what you're doing. So even if the act is you following up, but you don't have to say, hey, I'm calling to follow up. Right. So for example, let's go back to my opportunity, right, that I mentioned, like my phone call feed answered. I wouldn't say, hey, Chris, I'm just following up to the emails I've been sending you over the last couple of months. Like, can we talk? If he answered, it'd be like, hey, Chris, how's your New Year's? Blah, blah, it's great. Hey, reason I'm calling is when you and I spoke back in October, you had said we're ready to make this happen come Q1 as part of your AOP. So do you have some time to discuss details right now to map out how it's going to look for your team in Q1 for implementation? So it's a slight shift in language there, but it's very specific because I'm really clear on my objective. I'm not just following up to follow up. I have a clear end goal of what I want to do with that follow up. And for salespeople watching this, it's a very minor detail, but if you make that shift, you'll see you'll see your prospect. Wow, actually, like this guy or gal is much more like on their game than anybody else because they're so specific in what they're saying. And most people lack specificity when they speak, and they say general words like, "Hey, I'm just following up." So
yeah, this is just another example of an actionable tip that adds up to the 250,000 to 500,000 earning and up, right? It's these things consistently applied that lead to the better deals, the bigger deals, and more consistent deals. And by the way, that specificity, I realize that applies to cold email or a cold call. I mean, you gave a call example, but you up the specificity too in terms of messaging to get in the door for a first meeting, right? Like we work with other retailers of your size, maybe you put their specific company size to solve this specific challenge, produce these outcomes. I guess I just randomly went to this topic, but anything you would add in terms of specificity in outbound messaging? It could be cold emails, cold calls to get the first meeting, and just other keys to getting in the door to open up these big opportunities.
100%. So, and by the way, this is going to apply to whether it's outbound, okay, this could be calls, emails, whatever, to how you run your discovery calls, to how you do your demos.
Yep.
So, like for instance, if you're let's say you go after a large enterprise opportunity, and maybe you're selling to the retail space, and you're like before you go and do your outreach, maybe you sell a software that helps with optimization on the checkout process because you're seeing that the big trend is people are buying more online versus like talking to salespeople, right? So you're like, okay, so like our software can really help with that, really optimize it. So you go through and you pretend to be a prospect on their site, and you're checking out, and you're like, oh, here's all these gaps right here. Very powerful. And then you listen to their earnings call, and maybe they mention like some of the challenges they're running into, and maybe some conversions, right? So now you have maybe conversion data that they're talking about. You have examples from what you're doing yourself. So now when you call them up, it's an easier conversation to be able to say, hey, Chris, the reason I'm reaching out is because, well, number one, your CEO, Bob, had said one of the biggest issues you guys are having is people clicking off the page on the checkout page in that abandoned cart, which is leading to X percent people are clicking off, which is my assumption is about, $20 billion a year in like lost revenue. On top of that, I myself was on your page and I went through and I see exactly where people lead off. we have a potential solution that can help with this to actually increase optimization for click-throughs and conversions. And we're already working with other large enterprises such as X, Y, and Z. Now, notice that level of specificity is
Ooh,
like,
it's beautiful, man. How could they not respond?
Exactly, it's much better. Now, you go deep, take that same principle and you tie it to the rest of your sales process. So let's just say it's a demo. So mistake is on the demo. Let's just say you're still selling the same thing. And you're like, on the demo, most people are like, hey, let me show you this feature now that can really increase optimization. You know, like it will increase, it'll reduce your abandoned carts. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. Versus, hey, so you remember how your CEO said X% clicking off and it's leading to potentially X billions getting lost because there's no way to optimize for it? Let me show you feature Y, which solves exactly this. This is what it does. Can you see how that would solve that problem you're currently running into, and actually would help you increase the average cart order for your customers? Boom. So now
prospects leaning in.
Exactly. They're leaning in now. They're like, you're speaking my language, right? Because you're so specific. So, and it's really hard to fake specificity. It's very hard to fake it.
Oh, what a way to cut through the noise. And just another example that shows like this person is a professional.
That's right.
This is someone I can trust with a major investment.
That's
exactly. My job could be on the line. I could lose my job if I make the wrong one. So, man, time flies. We've got 24 minutes and there's so much I want to ask you about. So I'm going to do my best to keep it rolling. I wanted to hit on that inflection point after you basically were failing in your first year and then you became a beast, man, and figured it out. And just to continue at the roadmap, wanted to talk about like IPAs and we'll what that is and some of the actionable things we can do to join that deep six-figure earners club, and then talk about your coaching and everything you're doing. So that's what I'm trying to achieve in these 24 minutes. Let's see if we can get to it. Tell us about that shift, like that first year, like what was going on and what changed?
Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of people, whenever people make a shift, it's very rare. It's like they just realize on their own. Like usually something happens or enough small things happen to the point where, you're just like, man, like either I got to like figure this out or I'm in trouble. And, I think, and everyone's a little bit different. A lot of it has to do with your standards of yourself. I remember when I first got started, I had a pretty high standard of myself, just expectation of being able to show up. Now, in all my prior jobs, I've always been able to like work hard and get results. Now, granted, like they weren't hard jobs. It's like, hey, work as a cook in a restaurant. If I worked hard, I can make a good meal.
You're a cook?
Yeah, I was a cook, right? So,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's like you work hard, you got pretty good results. If I was a server, hey, I worked hard to take care of my customers. They were happy. They gave me a tip, right? So like, it was always like this direct correlation. And then once I got into like true like B2B sales, selling to businesses, it was like, oh, hard work by itself wasn't really enough. And it started to kind of eat at me early on because like my peers were closing deals and I wasn't. That's what it was. That's like my barometer. I'm like, what's going on with me? Right. I'm like, oh, I'm just new. But when weeks keep going by and they start at the same time as basically me and they're doing way better than me, eventually I have to start looking in the mirror. Now, at first, though, I'm like, well, it's not my fault. My boss didn't train me. My company doesn't give me any training. The manual it gave me is written by people who've never done sales before. I have the worst territory. I have the least amount of zip codes. Like, no one's helping me. The market's terrible because this is 2007, by the way. So the market's starting to go downhill really, really quickly. I'm like, this is the worst. Like, there's like, this is like, I'm not set up to win. And those are all my first internal excuses I had. Now, it was about 8 weeks into the role and I was not doing well. Like, not just like zero results, mentally not doing well because I'm like, can I even do this? What is wrong with me? Why is this so hard? And I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I was like, I think I should probably give up and do something else. And I was at that same point, my boss called me into his office on a Friday afternoon at 4. And he just ripped me a new one. And he said, listen, I'm looking to have to fire you. I'm going to put you on a PIP and fire you if you don't figure this out. Now, again, didn't provide any resources. He just threatened me. And like, this has never happened before. I'd never been like I wasn't used to this. I'm like, this is weird. Like usually like I can work pretty hard and I get results. And at that point, that's when I realized that I had to step it up and take things into my own hands. Right. And I realized at that point, I really had not taken true ownership. Like, was I really doing everything possible to become the best version of me? The story I told myself was, yeah, I am, but I wasn't, right? So, at that point when I really started to just take my job more seriously, right? Like going and reading books. I started to attend events like Tony Robbins events. I started to join coaching programs. I started to like learn sales, and like, because that wasn't being given to me. And then not only that, like, you think it's crazy, but I would like practice. Like I would role play nonstop with myself every part of the sales process because no one was willing to do it with me. Like I remember even I was trying to get better at cold calling. I had a 45-minute drive to the office one way. On the drive there, I would role play out loud my cold calls. I would go through, I'll play both sides, myself, prospect, go back and forth from the gatekeeper all the way through the main person. And I'll give myself objections. I'll give myself like 5 objections, the most common ones. I'm like, and I'll deal with them out loud verbally. And not only would I do it like out loud, I would do the exact tonality, the exact pace, the inflection, because I need to make sure I showed up that certain way. So like I started to do all these things, right? And and what happened, of course, I started getting better results, right? Like, and reality is actually by the 3rd month, I became number 1. And then I held number 1 for several more months. And then they basically made me switch to a different like territory and like basically manage some reps while having the same job still. And then I maintained my number 1 status still, right? But like, it was a realization that in order to achieve more, I had to become more. Like the version of me that got me to that job was not going to keep me in that job. And I think a mistake a lot of people make is, let's say they want to break into tech sales. They break into tech sales, amazing. They're in a huge, amazing opportunity vehicle. But do they have a skill stack to be able to fully maximize the opportunity to get to where they really want to go?
Let's talk about the skill stack, baby. Does a skill stack tie into IPAs, or would you categorize it like because I love that term, IPAs too, but do they both overlap, or are they synonymous?
Totally overlap. Because think about it, like, I mean, and there's so many potential skills you have to learn, right? From prospecting, discovery, organization, blah, 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 as part of it, right? But even like, it's about even IPAs, which are income producing activities, right? These are the things that make you money. And to be really crystal clear, I really break it down into 4 key things that are really IPAs. Number 1, you're like generating pipeline. Okay. Number 2, you're moving deals in your pipeline. Number 3, you're closing pipeline. And number 4, you're advancing your sales skills. And those show up in what you do on the calendar. So anything outside of that is just noise. And I think a lot of times, like, what we don't realize is if we were to track our own time and pay close attention, very rarely are we doing these IPAs at the level we probably think we should be doing it. And what you really want to be able to do is like ideally have like 80% of your calendar or more show IPAs. So that means your prospecting blocks, you have discovery calls with prospects, you have maybe legal calls or just demo calls with prospects, negotiation calls. Those are like you're actually moving the needle on deals, or you're like studying, improving your sales skills.
Okay. And by the way, you illuminated the fact that practicing is really important.
100%.
It's almost like another thing that is a great way to learn. I guess that's the final IPA.
100%.
So you're not just reading books, and you are doing trainings and reading books. That's important, but you're actually practicing like a crazy person in the car, talking to yourself in multiple tones.
That's right.
Love that, man. And you know what? I today was walking through a presentation deck a few times. I'm going to do it after this. And I just feel very encouraged that that's what you need to be doing. But is there any particular IPA that you might want to dig into that you think is like, I bet they're all almost They're all critically important, but is there one
Yeah.
in particular that you might want to double click into?
So they're all vitally important, right? And honestly, I would say it depends on kind of where you are in terms of your territory development. So like, for instance, let's just say you just joined a new company, right? And you have no pipeline.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good place to start, man.
Yeah.
That is. Yeah.
So if you have no pipeline, you're really not advancing deals forward. You're not closing deals, right? Your number one focus has to be generating pipeline, right? And again, that's one of the 4 components of the IPAs, right? So you need, for example, to make it super tactical, what that actually means is like, okay, if I need to generate X pipeline, you do your math to figure out what type of outbound you need to do, right? So maybe calculate, okay, I need to have a lead. That means I need to have at least 2 hours of outbound a day. All right. So just call, for simplicity's sake, we'll call it 2 hours of cold calling and 1 hour of I'm going to do of email. Great. So really,
and by the way, so you separate those two. Is that for productivity purposes rather than mixing them?
100%. 100%. So whenever you context switch between calls to emails, etc., what happens is you have attention residue that bleeds over from one task to the other task. Versus if you're on calls, you can like boom, 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 boom. Right.
Okay.
So you'll be really consistent with it.
Okay. And I have to chime in again. How do you know that you're targeting the right companies and contacts, right? Because I know that they're not all equal. So you have these blocks of your 2 hours of calling, 1 hour of email, but how do you know you're going for the right ones? What's your criteria?
Beautiful. So the first piece is ideally you want to be crystal clear on your ideal customer profile. All right. So you want to know exact things about them. So not just like the common demographics, but ideally some sort of psychographics, like their levels of pain and pain issues that they're running into. And then what you want to think through is if you're going to tiers 1, 2, and 3, depending on what type of data your company provides for you, ideally the hottest prospects are ones with some sort of trigger or buyer intent. All right. So for example, if your company has a tool like 6 Sense, then you might have signals showing you, hey, they've been like someone, a CTO from this company is clicking around your site on these pages. That's a pretty high intent signal. Okay, depending on which page it's going to be, right? So I'm always thinking like your hottest prospect should be like the right ICP, the right target market, the right use cases. Okay, so the right use that you can solve for, and then some sort of buying trigger. So like those are like the ones potentially, hopefully, they're in the active market of potentially on the hunt already to be looking for a solution or something, right? Those are the best ones. And then you can go down to the next level, which is maybe there's no necessarily immediate trigger, but they're still the right ICP, and they also have the same use cases, right? And then you can kind of go down to the worst ones, if you will, more of the searches, right? In the perfect world, you do a good enough job with the top stuff that you don't have to go to the bottom ones where it's just a general search, because those are usually the least effective. All right. So make sense so far? Good.
Absolutely. Keep rolling.
Beautiful. So let's talk about the IPAs, right? So you have your dedicated blocks. So all right, I need to make sure I'm filling the funnel up. So I got 2 hours of phones, 1 hour of email, and it's set in your calendar. So now you know that's your IPAs, right?
Okay. Again, Professor Marcus. So prioritize phone. Is that higher converting?
Yeah.
People avoid the phone, man.
People avoid the phone, but I love the phone.
Okay.
Like the phone is the fastest way to convert. That's just reality. So, you can, it's easier to handle objection on the phone than handle an objection via email. So,
yeah. Okay. Continue on. I had to call that out though.
Okay, cool. So you have the IPA. It's on your calendar. And then I would also build in time to master, improve your skills. Okay. This is like really getting your discovery, talk track, right? Do all these things. If you're like in a program like mine, you're going through the content, you're building out your frameworks, you're implementing, you're coming to the coaching calls, you're getting help, right? So you want time dedicated as part of your schedule to make sure you're actually advancing your skills. If you're going to role play, have time built in to role play. So like you want to make sure it's consistent with that, because what you're doing when you're consistent with that is you're building discipline, but also you're creating systems in place that you can like set and forget. As long as you know you're going to stick to your schedule, of like, I'm going to make sure, okay, from 8 to 10, I'm going to be on the phones. And then from, 10 to 11, I'm going to do cold email. Then, you got prospecting covered. Like it's unlocked. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Right. And that's how you get really, really effective. Now, over time, as you start to develop your territory, you probably will start shifting a little bit, right? Or maybe it's instead of having 5 days a week, because now you have more meetings and stuff, depending on what you sell, right? How many meetings you might have. Maybe now it's twice a week, right? Or maybe you're breaking up to daily stuff, or maybe smaller blocks, right? Maybe it's like an hour each day on the phones and then half an hour email, and it's broken up in blocks, right? But the key is having that consistently built in your calendar as part of your IPAs. Because what's going to happen is, as you're booking more meetings, which will be IPAs, those will be in your calendar too. But what you have to be really careful of is, especially when you're new into a company, is meetings start to pop up and show up on your calendar that you maybe don't want to go to, right? Because they're from your company. They're just not a good use of your time. People just invite you to random meetings for whatever reason, right? So this is where it gets hard for a lot of new people, new salespeople. They're like, I guess I should go to every single meeting. Well, do you need to? Or is it optional, right? Like, ask your boss, hey, I got invited to this meeting with RevOps about whatever. Like, is this required for me to go? Like, what's the objective of me being on this meeting? Like, it's okay to push back and find out why you need to be on certain meetings, because your goal is you have to protect your time. Because the more time you could spend selling, the more money you're going to make. And I think the Salesforce stat is like, I think the average reps is maybe 37% of the time selling, which is crazy, because selling is the number one way you excel in your role, make money.
So one of the key sales activities, one of the greatest, the epitome of selling, some might say, is the discovery call, because it can set the tone for the whole opportunity engagement. And so I know we're limited on time, man. By the way, for the audience, like, Marcus is actually sick right now and he's showing up like a beast. So let's acknowledge him for that.
Oh, thanks, man.
Check Marcus. We have like 8 minutes. Do you have a hard stop? If that's fine.
I actually have a hard stop in 4 minutes. If that's okay.
Okay. Cool. I'm glad I checked in. So maybe I'll try and fit in 2 questions. Gosh. Okay. Like a tip or 2 on discovery.
Perfect. So I have many tips on discovery, right? But I think most people have a good idea in terms of like what to kind of ask on the kind of upper level, right? But I think a mistake a lot of people miss is actually in the follow-up questions. So one super simple tip is, whenever someone responds to your discovery question, they give you a response. So if you just like, hey, if you say like, hey, why do you guys do it this way? And they say, oh, well, like we the reason we have our website optimized this way for the checkout is because of X, Y, and Z. Most people like, check, you got it. Now, instead, use this really simple framework I call RIM, okay? Which is, what's the relevance? What's the impact? What's the motive? What's the relevance? What's the impact? What's the motive? And you use that as a way to dig a little bit deeper to uncover what's the relevance of why they're saying that, what's the impact, and what's the motive. So, for instance, and then you can apply this, by the way, for any part of the discovery process. So they say, I don't know, they say, okay, I'll give you from my own company. Sometimes I'll get asked, hey, so does your company offer like reinforcement support for like the training? And that could be an easy yes or no answer, right? Now, a rookie market would say, yeah, we have that. Okay. But seasoned market says, hey, that seems like it's really important to you. Can you help me understand, what's making you ask this? And now it's going to lead to a deeper, more rich answer. It might sound something like, well, the reason we ask is because, in the past we've done workshops and people kind of forget about it after after the week is over. So we don't really get the ROI. And I know my boss is going to ask about this, so I need to have an answer for them. Got it. So now I can go even deeper. Hey, so, okay, had your boss asked about this before in the past? Yes, he has. And what has happened in that situation? Well, didn't go out and have an answer. Okay, what's he looking for specifically? What would he like to see? So now, before you know it, I pulled out one single thread, right? I'm trying to cover the relevance, the impact, the motive, and it's going to lead to potentially a very different response I need to have to really address what's really on their mind down the road, whether it's about demo or something else. So you may have great discovery questions, but when people respond back, think, what's the relevance? What's the impact? What's the motive? If you implement every single way, you'll find you're able to, go an inch wide, like a mile deep, and you'll get deeper and more richer insights by going super deep that way.
So much wisdom has been shared today, Marcus. Thank you so much. And we're just scratching the surface of the wealth of knowledge that you are. So let's finish up by talking about who your coaching is for and kind of what people can expect at a high level. And I've linked to your LinkedIn profile, your free training, 6-figure sales secrets, and some of your resources in the description of the video for them to check out to follow up. So who's it you're coaching for and what's it like?
Awesome. So I work directly with hungry tech sales AEs who want to fully max out the comp line. They want to earn $250,000, $500K plus, if not more, depending on their comp structure. But they also want to do it in a way where they're not working like 80 plus hours a week. And they want a repeatable, systematic framework across the board. This is whether they're working at company A or at company B. So often we find that for a lot of our customers, they come in, we're helping them crush it at one company. Some will stay there, but then they'll usually end up doing is they'll crush it at one company and they may jump into another company for a better opportunity vehicle, right? Yes. Until the point they basically hit escape velocity, or they build a side hustle and they just go off and do their own thing as part of it.
So literally you sign up with Marcus, crush it at your own company. Then you can identify if there's a better company to go to where you could crush it and make even more in a better opportunity vehicle. And then you're probably going to end up with a side hustle going all in, or just escape velocity where you're financially set at 35. And if you take a little longer, that's okay. But Marcus, any other final words? Otherwise, I'll tie a bow in this conversation. We got to get you rolling to your next thing.
No, it's my absolute pleasure. I think if you're watching this and listening to this, later, that congratulations to you, because that means you're in the small percentile, the top 1% of sales professionals who are hungry, and you're taking your own career into your own hands. So kudos to you, and go crush it.
Absolutely. To the audience, your success in tech sales and in life, happy selling and happy living, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, Marcus.